thank you all for allowing me to spend some time with you today. I was pleased to get the call to have this opportunity, and it's right here in Kansas. So those of you who are visiting from other states, welcome to our great state of Kansas. We're happy to have you here. I want you to know that while I do have the opportunity to coordinate our Kansas's Technical Assistance System Network, or TASN as we call it, I really am just a messenger that represents a whole lot of great educators in the state of Kansas. I believe you all met Brad Neuenschwander, who was our deputy commissioner this morning as he welcomed you. Some of you may have also met Colleen Riley last night at a welcome. We also have great support from our Kansas Commissioner, Diane DeBacker. And I have as my partners about 60 service providers within TASN that are the heart and soul of why we do what we do in Kansas in terms of supporting, in terms of technical assistance. Now, so I'm just a messenger. I hope that I'll be able to provide you with at least some basic information about how we do things. But as you said, when you were introducing me, we do things a little bit differently in Kansas, and we kind of like being like that. And but sometimes it's a little different. It's a little bit hard to wrap your arms around how we got to where we got to. So I'm going to talk a little bit about that today. And I'm also going to call on my friends who are not standing up here with me, but are right here, right in the room with me. So especially Lesli and Zuleika, and where's Connie? Connie's not in here. Okay, so Connie may join us as well, because I do want to make sure that the presentation is presented in such a way that it makes sense to you all about possibilities that might exist in your own states about collaborative partnerships. So I am going to tell you a little bit about how we got started and how we do business in Kansas. And so I wanted to take us on a little bit of a walk about, and it's really a bird's eye kind of view, and I'm going to kind of refer to notes because for those of you who don't know me, I can talk about this because I know why I do this. And I can talk about it for a long time. So in respect of your time, and also I want to allow time for questions, I'm going to try to refer to notes and keep myself on task. So you are going to see me doing this. Now, one of the things that we had going for us as we were looking at the creation of TASN is that we had always, historically, had a great support from our Kansas State Department of Education in terms of committing significant resources that would be used to provide either free or very low-cost support to Kansas districts, schools, students, families. We've always had that. And one of the ways that our State Department funds that type of support is through federal discretionary dollars that come to our state level leaders, and primarily special education leaders who had very much had vision about how these dollars could be used. And those dollars were used to create projects based on needs. Now, in the past, and we'll talk about this a little bit as we go along, in the past, those projects were really created out of personnel needs and unique student population needs. It was kind of a hodgepodge. And while they were all great work that was happening, it really wasn't happening in a coordinated way in terms of how we were delivering it. So we are in year 3 of what we call TASN now. So we're kind of new in that way. However, we come from a great history. So we learned from our experience that we understood that we had a lot of qualified, highly skilled service providers that were available. We knew that we had that piece of support from our State Department of Education. We had access to, Kansas has had a SPDIG. How many of you others that have the SPDIG going? A SPDIG for years has really pushed effective professional learning. evaluation pieces. So we had some of that influence coming in. We also had undertaken a study of the implementation science. What does it really take in order to change cultures, to change practices so that systems change really occurs? So we've been studying some of that. So all of that kind of came together to say, 4 years ago, how do we go about making this shift to where we can get bigger bang for our buck? More support, more coordinated support, so less duplication of support, less gaps of support. So we had that. We also saw, as we were having these discussions about how could we possibly, pull together and more collaboratively provide technical assistance, we saw some changes coming from the federal and the state level, where there really was a shift that was we were moving away from accountability systems that were just about collecting data, doing monitoring and reporting, and knew that we were moving into an environment where it was going to become more important how we supported the educators and families in our state to get better than just to simply report, well, here's our good areas, here's our bad areas, blah, that kind of thing. So we were excited about that possibility. It kind of gave us that so what. So what are we had invested so much money into creating data collection systems and reporting systems and pretty things that we would send off and put in files somewhere, when we really wanted to direct more of our effort to helping schools get better, helping families and students get the support that they needed. So we took on us the opportunity to move from a system, and I'm going backwards, essentially making a shift from supports that were generally created around sort of disability-specific areas, like we had an autism project, or we had a project for students with traumatic brain injuries, and we had an early childhood project. We had all these different kinds of things. We also are moving away from what we called a system that really wasn't a system. We didn't really have the expectations for coordination, collaboration. There was a lot of inconsistency. We had some great providers who'd call up another provider and say, hey, we ought to work together, right? And we had some of that, but it really wasn't getting us where we wanted to go. And evaluation was very much project specific, and we kind of lived in our little happy silos. So we decided that what we really needed to do was to move to a system that had a basis of how we were going to align our support. So we aligned around our state board policies, priorities for accountability. Of course, we can't, we'll never get away from accountability, right? I mean, that's part of what we do. And we also wanted to make sure that whatever we created was a structure that would be able to be easy for our customers to access. And we wanted it to be in a coordinated way so that we could have some consistency of message, so that we understood what are the practices we really are trying to promote and get behind. Some of those processes and those practices were around family engagement. And we also wanted to make sure that we had evaluation that would lead decision making at all different levels, so that it wasn't sort of that hodgepodge of what we had done before. And so it's not that we didn't have good services or good providers doing what we needed to do, but they weren't great, and we weren't all working together as a system. So we decided to make some changes. So who are these TASN providers of whom I speak? They are a whole lot of folks, and you can see here that some of them are staff members of the SEA. We have some staff members that are hired through our SPDIG, various projects, and Shonda, are you going to be talking about that later today? Okay, so Shonda is one of our TASN providers, so you'll be hearing more about some work that she's working on. We also have partner with our education service centers across the state. We adopted our Parent Training and Information Center staff a long time ago, but we began to work, I think, more closely together as TASN has grown and developed. We also had a terrific Parent Information Resource Center here in Kansas, and we were very crushed when the feds decided they're not funding PERCs anymore. So TASN, as a whole, who is sponsored by our State Department of Education, stepped up to the plate and kept funding our PERC. So we still have Jane Groff, who Lesli and others work with very closely, and we still have that resource in Kansas because we value it. We know and understand the reason why we need to have great expertise in this area. We also partner with universities both in the state and out of the state. We partner with our state schools, and we even have a nonprofit affiliate, which is United Cerebral Palsy out of Chicago, with their Infinitech project that comes out of there. And so it's just this interesting mix that it poses its challenges in terms of communication, in terms of having different philosophies. Everybody has, we sort of have this TASN work that we do, but everyone else, we all have our other bosses as well, right? So I don't want to send anyone the message that we have it all figured out and that we all always agree on exactly the direction we should be going. And we just all get on board and we hold hands and we just go do the work and there's never a problem. I don't want to send that message. We're very diverse. But what we do have is that we have extremely skilled, extremely creative, extremely opinionated individuals in our district, in our system. However, we're also very committed to collaboration, and when these issues come up, we just stay at the table until we figure out what we are all going to do and how we're going to get around it, and we just keep working until we figure it out. I think that's a fair way to say that. Sometimes that's not pretty, but we all, I think, come from the place that in TASN we're committed to serving our students and their families and the teachers and the schools and the districts that support them. So we have that common ground from the beginning. So it makes it kind of interesting and fun for me. Of course, I kind of like that stuff. So we come together around a common approach. And within TASN, we have not as frequent of communication as I'd love. I love to get all the TASN providers together, and we do that at least quarterly, as well as through many other means and work groups and things like that in between. But we did determine as we were setting up the system that we were going to focus on capacity building, because when it comes right down to it, as TASN providers, as we're working with a district or a school or a teacher or a family, we don't implement anything. What we can teach are those practices to others, right, who then will implement those on our behalf. Because we can't be there every day with that family. We can't be there every day with that teacher. So we have to come in and from the beginning with all of our services that our job is not to implement something. Our job is to support others to be able to implement those practices that are going to make a difference for the students, the families, the teachers, all the way up. So it's a little bit different than we had approached our thinking in some ways. We also were committed to following and continuing to learn more about the principles from the implementation research that speaks to us about what are those drivers of implementation of new practices that will really result in those practices being adopted and provided in the way that they are intended. It's kind of like coming to a conference like this, and we hear about a great practice, so we try to support it, but how do you support it all the way down to that student level so it's being implemented, so it's going to make a difference for that student? That's a tall, tall order. And it's something that we knew we needed to get a little more strategic about. And so that's another thing that we committed to. As you saw in the previous slide, where we have, providers from all different types of agencies, as you can imagine, we have a whole lot of different funding streams that support the work of all these providers. And so we made a commitment to say, let's align and coordinate our work, regardless of whether you're funded by SPDIG, and you're funded by the PTI, and I'm funded on a grant, and this is funded by, whatever, Part B discretionary dollars. Whatever it is, the funding stream doesn't matter. We have to keep the accounting straight. But in terms of the work that we do, we're all about serving the same districts, the same schools, the same families, right? We're all in Kansas. We have that common source. So let's all coordinate to do that. And I think one of the things that made a very big difference as we started down this path is that as we were creating TASN, we also created what we call as 12 operating principles. And sometimes we have to go back and review those and remind ourselves. But some of the principles, and I think it was interesting because one of the first principles that we determined as a group who were developing what TASN was going to become was that all TASN providers must demonstrate the involvement of families, and we will engage our PTI and or our PERC staff as resources to ensure that demonstration of that commitment to families. So that was not something I just made up for you today. This was something that was decided around a table years ago that has continued to lead us. Now, I will tell you that over the last 3 years, it's been a road that was not smooth. And we had to learn where all of our silos were. And many times in the past, it was kind of like, I can't remember who was talking earlier, but talking about how, you may have partnered with someone on a grant, but it was something very cursory. It was something very, could you come in and present, or could you just write this document for us for families, or something like that, We had that too. And I feel like really, just over the last couple of years, we've really started to move, I think, into a better place. Because we had some education to do with our internal providers. Providers would say, oh yeah, we wanted to support parent involvement, family engagement, but they don't know how, right? Oh, well, we'll contract with Lesli, and then whatever she does, that's how we'll address it. So we had some learning to do, and we will continue to be on that learning. In fact, I was with a group yesterday that Families Together actually couldn't be there at because they were here. But we were talking about family engagement and talking about how can we continue to help our TASN providers. And so our first TASN provider meeting of the year will have it as the main topic, parent engagement. So we'll be talking more about that as we go along. I'm going to kind of skip ahead here because Lesli, do you want to talk at this point just a little bit about some of the collaborative work that you have done with TASN providers, how you've seen it kind of change over the years, or anything you'd like to say?
Probably speak loud enough without this too, but I took a couple notes, but not very many. I'm going to get some of my other partners on this Families Together staff up here too, so you're not just hearing from me all the time. But I wanted to back up and say something about what you originally said about the foresight, because I really think that Colleen, I need to credit her a lot with having the foresight of when this was coming to be, before we even knew about it, of her making that decision that it was going to be a requirement that these providers do engage with their parent training information center and parent resource center, because like she said, we had done some things before that already, but most of it was around our education advocate or surrogate parent, program, or support through, for our statewide conferences, some support for taking, bringing families to conferences and things like that. But we hadn't done anything really formal beyond that. And she left it wide open. She didn't say how they had to collaborate with us or connect with us, and it didn't necessarily always mean dollars for us. And what happened was very quickly, the people that we worked with pretty regularly anyway rose to the top, right away. And through that, Shonda's going to talk some more this afternoon, but Project Success is one of those where they reached out right away and not only just, talked with us, but then they put funds on the table for us to do some of the things we're already doing. And I think that's what I've appreciated the most, because no one can give us tons of money, and they recognize that, and they also recognize that we already do a lot of good things, and so they support us to do what we do best. And that's the thing that we've always wanted, for people to realize, don't make us come up with this whole new thing, because we've got the things figured out that we're good at. So that's been really nice. Through Project Success, we've done, and I guess I have to talk about those meetings real quick too, because those quarterly meetings at first, we truly were like fish out of water. Even though we had known each other, some of us pretty well, but everybody was like, well, what are they bringing us here for, and what are we going to do? And it was very focused on compliance indicators and what we're doing around special education. And so when you said it's been 3 years, I think there's been tremendous growth over those 3 years, because I look forward to those meetings. We've met new people. We know so much more about a lot of our projects within the state that we probably should have known about. And even more importantly to us is they know about us, and they're reaching out to us in different ways. We've created some great documents. One of them that we just finished with Project Success is called Success for All Kids, Access to the General Education Curriculum. And the neat thing about having meetings regularly is that you know what's going on in your state, and so we knew there was going to be a lot of stuff going on around co-teaching, so we made sure we integrated that into it and used Richard Villa's work in that. I'm going to let Darla talk a little bit about our tertiary behavior support project, because that's another example of how that came to be right when we were in the middle of writing for the PTI grant, actually, the renewal. And so we included the ideas that were coming out of working with that group. And so we not only have the PTI support for that, but we also have support through TASN. So I'll let Darla talk a little bit about that.
Lesli informed me that I was going to be talking at lunch. So I haven't really prepared anything formal, but Lesli and I and some of the other Families Together staff are involved in what's called tertiary behavior support training. And this past year, what we did was we brought 6 district teams together, and the district teams were comprised of administrators, general education teachers, special education teachers, school psychologists, social workers, et cetera, and one family. And we took an individual kiddo, kind of a case, if you will, and we looked at how to develop a great functional behavior assessment, how to collect data on that kiddo, on particular behavior that we were focusing in on, and then came back the next month and looked at the data collection and how we use that data to drive a decision about how we were going to intervene and how we were going to build a wonderful supportive behavior intervention plan. And the whole time, it's not just district teams, but parent training and information center staff were there, as well as the family of the identified student. And our hope was that we would build that capacity with that district team to go back into their districts, or even in cooperatives, we still have cooperatives in Kansas, to go back and do this same work within their own areas of the country. We had both rural teams. We had a big cooperative that serves like 20 counties in our state. We had urban districts, and so it's really unique. And the other thing, we haven't talked about MTSS so much, but in the tertiary behavior supports, it's not just for kids that have individualized education programs, but any student who needs that tertiary intensive type of support. So a couple of our kids did not even have an IEP, nor probably needed one, but just needed a great behavior intervention plan to come into play. The PTI staff is primarily engaged to involve the family, keep the family voice active in those discussions and in that decision-making process, as well as providing support and follow-up for the families after the trainings are completed.
She's good off the cuff, isn't she? And the great thing about this project too is that, again, we were able to incorporate some of the things we're already doing. We have, our challenging behaviors workshop that we're doing. We do a lot of things around MAPS, McGill Action Planning System, and we were able to put that into the new plan for the coming year. So we're really excited. And like she said, it's grown. We've known Lee Stickle and Linda Wilkerson for some time now. In fact, I encourage them to have them here. And I think we're going to have them on one of the directors' calls sometime to do some training because they're wonderful. But anyway, even though we've known them for a long time, our relationship has grown a lot. And now it's not just people kind of telling us what they're doing, what are you doing? It's like we're getting together regularly and we're talking about what do we want it to look like? What did we learn last year? What are we going to change moving forward? Those kinds of things. So lots of great stuff going on. Is Connie back in here yet? She must have got held up. Okay. Zuleika, your turn. Where is she?
Oh, let's wait for Zuleika.
You want to wait for
There's
Zuleika?
a couple
Okay.
of things I want to, kind of talk about in our story. And she's really, the anticipation, she's loving it. And I want her to enjoy it for as long as she possibly can. So as we started to redefine what our work was going to look like, and Leslie's talked a little bit about it, we've had several different pieces of and political changes that have happened along the way. Just when you think you've got something figured out, another thing comes around, right? So we tried to come up with some schematics about what responsibilities were going to be done by whom, what were going to be the feedback loops, the communication loops that were going to happen to make this whole thing work. And I can't get on the internet here, but I do want to give you a link, and of course you can always follow the link on the card. But in that first line, we really tried to break it down by responsibility. And the KSD, Early Childhood, Special Education, and Title Services team, which was only formed in October. Colleen Riley is the director now of that team, which has been great because Colleen always got it that kids with disabilities are in every classroom, in every school. And when we work with kids with disabilities, we're not just targeting special ed teachers, right? The majority of the time that kids spend in school is in general ed, right? And so always the resources and her thinking as she has helped to envision and lead us to what we have developed now has been on that basis, that we want to make sure that opportunities are provided for students wherever they are. So our KSDE leadership, and Colleen has 4 assistant directors that meet with us regularly, and their job is really to monitor the state data. And we look at state data from a variety of things. Of course, we look at those more standardized pieces. We love us some SPP APR data, right? We look at performance of students. We look at how we're engaging. We bring in information from our consumers and from our internal providers who are out in the trenches with principals and teachers and families and students to get an understanding of how are we doing as a state. And then from there, priorities have to be set in terms of where are we going to focus our emphasis. And that's tough because there's a ton of worthy work that needs to be doing and to be done. But there's a finite pot of money and resources to do it. And so I really appreciate having leadership that has the guts to say, this is the priority. We may not be able to do everything, but what we can do well. And so our leadership really is who sets the priorities for that. Then the TASN Coordination Evaluation Team, which I'm a part of, is charged with looking and brokering resources to help to support those priority areas. We tap into our TASN internal membership for feedback and input, and it's our job to monitor effectiveness of the system. Are we collaborating well? Are we following through? Are we being responsive to customer requests? Are we getting where we need to get in terms of this system that we have developed? And then we have our little army of providers. And like I said, there's about 60 of us if you line us all up and we're all together on one day, which doesn't happen very often at all. But it's our job then to go out and to build that district capacity and evaluate the effectiveness of the services. Now, when you talk about building the capacity at districts, it's like, okay, so then building the capacity for what? Districts have to identify the practices that they're going to try to promote and try to implement that will impact them in terms of their ability to improve. And I think that, and I'm going to talk in a little bit more, a little later about our waiver with the ESEA, but I think that is something that's really kind of launched us forward. And we really have the attention of districts now about not just practices that will support achievement like direct explicit instruction, but they're beginning to realize other kinds of supports like supports for social emotional behavior, supports in terms of families being more engaged, have a real impact on those things that get measured, like student achievement in reading and math and those kind of things. And so I think we're really at an exciting point in Kansas, because I think we really are getting over that hump instead of, knocking at the door and say, gosh, this family engagement thing, you ought to pay attention to this. Or, gosh, this doing, providing good positive behavioral supports, would be a really good thing. You ought to do it. And they're saying, well, gosh, neither one of those get measured on the state assessments. Right? But they're starting to get it. And I think that it's because we've been able to get that language out more and more. And I think that we're just about over the hump to make sure that individuals in our districts and schools understand that, if we're missing the boat if we don't support family engagement and actively support what that looks like. So, the question is then, how do people access all this great stuff that we do, right? Well, some of it, and I would say the majority of it at this point, is accessed by request of district schools and families. And you heard a little bit about the big blue button, and I'm going to show you a picture of that here in a little bit on our website. If you go to ksdetasn.org, it's a very simple process to click the big blue button, and then there is a form that comes up that's very easy. It just says, who are you? How do we contact you? And then a quick description of what is it that you're looking for? What do you need? And we have had requests from superintendents, principals, grandmas, moms, teachers, any related service providers. It doesn't matter. Now, cannot say at this point that every time we get a request that we can automatically fulfill that request, because we may not be able we may not provide a particular service that someone is looking for. However, what this does do is to provide a single point of contact, so that, in the past, if you were an educator or a parent, if you happen to know about Families Together, or you happen to know about Project Success and you could hunt them down and make a request or find them, good for you. But if you happen to be new or you didn't know about those supports, you were just kind of out of luck. And so what we've tried to do was to bring it all together through the big blue button. And what happens when someone clicks on that button, it generates an email directly to me as the coordinator. Some days there's a lot of those. But it's my job then to understand and know the scope of the support that we have available within TASN. And then as we have begun, and then match the request with the support that is needed. That way it takes all of the legwork from the grandma or the mom or the teacher or whoever to have to try to figure out where to go for help. They can go one place, and then it's my job to find the right match of support for them. And so it's a very good thing. And so if we would have a grandma or mom or a family member make a request, Families Together is listed as one of our service providers, then I would assign that request to Families Together. It goes right to them, and they can respond and have the contact information of the family. If it's a question about co-teaching, that request might get sent to Shonda. So it's up to me to know how to, and our coordination team to know what's happening in our system, what are available, and then if it's something that we don't have, we can at least give a lead to that person about where to go for that support. It's been tremendous over the last few years. We've begun to become much more collaborative with our educational service centers, our universities, and other providers of services that can be beneficial to schools and families. And so the more we know about that, the more it's not that we need to provide that service, we become the broker, right? We become the connector, so that, again, there's one place that you can go without, having to call around a million places and get passed around and those kind of things. So technical assistance is either requested, or it's provided at the request of districts, families, or schools, and sometimes TA is provided as directed by KSDE. Typically that happens through some type of an accountability system. So if we have issues around compliance around IEPs or something like that, a district or school might be requested or required to access us. We always like that. Everybody loves to have them told what to do, but it is something that we do. I also thank you for mentioning MTSS. And most of you know, and most states have some type of a multi-tiered system of support. We like to say that here in Kansas, we came up with the name multi-tiered system of support. But it is another huge initiative that we have going on in our state. And the practices, from my point of view, the practices that we support within TASN are those things that will support a good system of support that's going to be able to, in every school, be able to identify what students need additional support, provide that support, make sure it's the right match of support and progress monitor, and collaborate to make sure that all kids are successful. So thank you for mentioning MTSS. So a little bit more about the website, and I hope you do visit it. I will tell you that as you visit it over these next few years, that you'll see it change, because we're never satisfied with anything we do, right? That's what gets us up in the morning. But we do have a common calendar, so all of our TASN providers are to put on the calendar what events they have coming up, what webinars, workshops, what are things that are available. And again, it's a single place to go to without having to visit 15 other websites. We do have a resource depot that is, again, it's kind of under construction right now, but the idea is that we want to be able to put key resources there, easily accessible. And then we have the request system, which is the big blue button. And then we have what's behind the big blue button. Now, I told you before, I'm kind of like the wizard behind the curtain, right? That I'm the one that helps to direct where that goes. But we have also the ability then for our providers to go into the back, what I call the back side of the website. And this is what I wanted Zuleika to talk about just a little bit, because it allows us to keep track of who's going where, what districts and families are accessing our support, where are there pockets that seem to need something more or less. And so tracking not in terms of, are our providers doing what they're supposed to be doing? Maybe a little bit of that, but mostly where are we getting that? So Zuleika, do you want to talk just a little bit about how you've used that data system, or how you've used that for things that she's thrilled. Come on up here.
As she said, and as Leslie has said, I'm part of the TASN team, and what I basically do is put in the data, our data, into the behind-the-scene blue button. And some of the data that I put in is when we are contacted by service providers, school personnel, special ed teachers, administrators, etc., and just briefly, I just state what the call was about or what they were needing, what kind of resources or what kind of assistance they were needing, and then what we provided to help them, what kind of assistance we gave them. Another thing that I put in there is all of our conferences. I am the one to add it to the calendar so that everyone is aware of what activities or events we have going on at Families Together. And then I do also the follow-up, when we also do get requests on for workshops and for who those workshops are for and what the outcome was on that. Am I done? Am I missing?
And what I hope, and you can tell me if I'm wrong here, is that is a way that then all of our providers can also pull reports from that database so that they can see, where
What's
they've
the need?
been, and if there's any other reporting requirements that you have, that's a way of helping to meet it. Question, yes?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yes. Yeah. Pardon me? Okay, a couple of questions there. The first question was a great one, was about what do you do when there might be multiple service providers who could and should work together to provide support to fulfill this request for whomever it's coming from. And the way we can assign, typically I assign a primary provider. So for example, if it was a parent, I might have Families Together or our KPERC as the primary provider. And then we can assign also assisting providers. And then they can also be notified of the request, what it says, and then the primary assignee, if you will, then is responsible to kind of get, to work together, and they figure out together how they're going to provide that support. So we found out right away that was necessary. Because oftentimes there's, and that's the great thing about being in a system. In terms of my position and how it's funded, I am also funded on a grant through KSDE. And just like we have a project that is about, project success, which you'll hear about later. Poor Shonda's like, why am I here? Or we have others around, so we have early childhood project. We also now have a grant project whose responsibility is to coordinate and evaluate this particular system. And so that's why I work for and through Pittsburg State University, because they're the fiscal agent for that grant. However, that is a grant that comes from KSDE. So I'm pretty sure that I'm running out of time. Am I completely out of time? Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I'm going to wrap up then reluctantly, because I could, as I said, talk about this forever. I did want to just put, am I going the wrong way? I am. Okay. I really, really want to talk just for a couple minutes and plant this seed in your thinking, is that, we're very familiar with IDEA, because that's what has funded special education for, since 1975, 74, something like that. But we are really at, I think, an interesting crossroad in our country. And many states, not all, but many states went after these ESEA waivers. And I will tell you that I think we've made more strides in getting our general ed counterparts to think about special ed kids through our work with ESEA than I did with IDEA. And I started out as a para 115 years ago, right? So I want us to continue to think about how we can continue to partner with our reg ed counterparts. We knew that special ed kids with disabilities, right, are general education kids first, and they spend the majority of their time there. So we can do all kinds of great things to support special educators, but we may be having less impact than we'd like to on our students when we have that kind of approach. The structure of TASN allowed us very quickly to move to the aid and support of others at the state agency when this SEA waiver came around. And some liked that and some did not like that. But it's been tremendous. When we started looking at the data to look at which are the districts and schools who are lowest performing around our ESEA or regular ed requirements, and we compared that to our districts who were missing targets around special education data, like graduating kids with disabilities and the kids' performance, guess what we found out? With very few differences, they're the exact same districts. So why would we be trying to create systems of support that are separate and parallel? So I would just encourage you to think about that as we close here. Some of the things that we did was to make ourselves very available, even though we all had other full-time jobs, to come along in that work. And I feel like we're starting to have a tremendous impact on students with disabilities because of our work with our general ed peers. So I will close with that. The belief system that we ground ourselves within TASN, having to do with the fact that we need to allocate resources according to what the data says and be committed and able to be flexible when that occurs. And sometimes that occurs in a way that makes us happy, and sometimes that occurs in a way that does not. I'm going to close there, thanking you for your time. If there are any other questions, I'm happy to entertain them. Maybe not right now because you've got somewhere else to go, but always you can click the big blue button and it just comes to me, right? So you can always do that. Also, when you go to that website, there is another Contact Us button. And again, if you click Contact Us and just it'll just give you an email form, that'll come right to me too. So easy to get a hold of me. Happy to answer any of your questions. So thank you for being here.